video introduces the basics of citing sources using MLA Style 8th edition. To cite something means to use it as evidence to support what you're saying. Citing is an important part of academic writing. It gives credit to your outside sources, it helps strengthen your argument, and it also gives your readers the ability to find your sources on their own. Citing is also how you avoid plagiarism, which means using someone else's words or ideas without giving that person credit. There are two parts to citing in MLA: brief in-text citations in the body of your paper, and at the end of your paper, a works cited list of the complete citations for all your sources. There are three situations when you need to cite. The first is when you quote someone's exact words. This is called a direct quotation, and it should always go in quotation marks. In this example, you can see that the text in green is taken word for word from the original source. Second, you need to cite when you paraphrase or summarize someone else's ideas. To paraphrase means to reword. You're saying basically the same thing someone else said, but in a different way. For example, here I've paraphrased a sentence about tomatoes. To summarize means to briefly state the main points. A summary is generally shorter than the original. For example, if I were to summarize the plot of the movie Finding Nemo, I might say, a fish loses his son Nemo and swims across the ocean to find him, and then briefly list a few highlights from the movie. Third, you need to cite whenever you provide information that isn't considered common knowledge. Common knowledge can be tricky to define, but here's a guideline. Something is probably common knowledge if it's an undisputed fact that your audience is likely to be familiar with and is easy to look up in general reference sources. For example, Sacramento is the capital of California would be considered common knowledge. Opinions and statistics are generally not considered common knowledge. If you're not sure, go ahead and cite. Throughout your paper, whenever you quote, summarize, paraphrase, or state information that isn't common knowledge, you immediately give an in-text citation for the source. In-text citations usually give the author's last name and the page number the information came from, but there are variations, like when there is no author or page number. In-text citations serve as visual indicators that you have evidence for the points you're making, and they also give your reader enough information to find the full citation for the source in your list of works cited. In-text citations are usually placed where there's a natural pause in the text, often at the end of a sentence or maybe at the end of the paragraph if it's clear that all the information in that paragraph came from one source, like in our carrot example. There are a few ways you can do in-text citations. If there's an author, you can sometimes integrate the author's last name into the sentence and simply list the page number at the end. For example, according to Dr. Morty McVegetable, 62% of Americans prefer broccoli to cauliflower, 218. For the record, this is a completely made-up statistic. Or you can list both the author's last name and the page number at the end. If there is no author, you list the title instead. If there's no page number, you simply list the author's last name, or if there's no author and no page number, like in this example, you just give the title. Your works cited list goes at the end of your paper, and it's where you give the full information for all the sources you cited in text. It should start at the top of a new page, and it will only include the sources for which you have in-text citations. It should be alphabetized, double-spaced, and the entries should have hanging indentation, which means for every citation, every line other than the first should be indented by ½ inch. Because the entries aren't numbered, this formatting makes it easier to see where the citations begin and end. There are detailed guidelines for how to cite specific types of sources. This process can seem daunting, but with some practice, you can get the hang of it. And luckily, you don't need to memorize anything. You do need to get yourself a good MLA style guide. This can be the official MLA handbook, a writing guidebook, or it could be a high-quality website like Purdue University's online writing lab. Or maybe your teacher gave you an MLA handout to use. In the current 8th edition of MLA, every source is cited according to one template with 9 possible elements. The elements always go in the same order, but you don't always include every element, only the ones that apply to your type of source. For each citation, follow the punctuation shown in the template. If you've learned how to cite using a previous version of MLA, you'll notice that this new system is different. In previous versions, each type of source had its own template. Two other big changes in the MLA 8th edition are the container and location elements. The container element is used when your source is part of a larger whole. For example, an article in a magazine or an episode in a TV series. The magazine and the TV series would be the containers. It's also possible for a source to have two containers. For example, let's say you found the magazine in a library database, or you watched the TV show on Netflix. The library database and Netflix would be the second containers. When there are two containers, elements 3 to 9 repeat and you fill them in as applicable. Here's what the citation for a magazine article from a library database would look like. The location element applies to a few types of sources. When a source is part of a container that has page numbers, like this magazine article, you put the source's page numbers as the location. For online sources, like this web page, the location is usually the URL. This may seem like a lot to remember, but with practice, you can get the hang of it. Get in the habit of referring to your MLA style guide and ask your teacher or a librarian if you have any questions. And always follow your teacher's directions, even if they're different from what I've shown here. Finally, it's a good idea to keep track of your citations as you go. When you find a new source, make sure you have all the information you'll need to cite it. Thanks for watching and happy citing!